remember to turn on all notifications so you don't miss a video. Luffy vs Kaido. This fight should be epic due to how important it is, but I believe it's a bad fight that is mostly devoid of meaningful strategy. I read some parts of the fight, but never the whole thing. I believe haki is more of an issue here, but we'll find out. I predict button mashing syndrome will also be a problem. I'm going to try and only focus on Luffy vs Kaido. The fight starts in chapter 1000. Luffy dodges a strike from Kaido and strikes with Red Rock. Apparently, he combined gear 2nd and 3rd here, which is always cool to see. In 1001, Kaido attacks with buso haki and Luffy barely blocks it despite using kenbun haki. Kaido attacks Luffy, but Law switches him away. Luffy uses gear 4th Kong gun on Kaido, then the latter turns into a dragon. In 1002, Luffy and others attack Kaido, but none of it is effective. Kaido shoots fire at Luffy, but it doesn't work because of guts. That's stupid. Luffy then uses Kong Gatling, and for some reason, these punches work and put Kaido on the floor. In 1003, Luffy runs out of steam and Kaido eats him, but Zoro frees his captain. Kaido's macro strategy is that his scales, combined with his human strength and haki, are impenetrable, and that only Oden's swords are their kryptonite. Zoro does damage with one of Oden's swords, but how did Luffy do damage? Nothing has been said about emission or internal destruction yet. The wiki says that it's simply because Luffy advances basic buso to the point where it could harm the scales. I'll come back to that later. So far, Luffy's obstacle is that Kaido is too strong. He overcomes this by leveling up his haki to be stronger. Fascinating. Meanwhile, Kaido has no macro strategy, now that his scales are penetrable. At the end of the chapter, Kaido uses his man-beast form. Why does Kaido even use the full beast form? I don't understand why anyone would use it over the human beast form. Human beast gives the best of both worlds. He can use fire and wind in both forms. In 1009, Kaido and Big Mom fire an attack and Zoro blocks it. Luffy uses Red Hawk, but Kaido dodges and strikes with his club. He dodged because he knew it would hurt. Kaido shoots fire, misses, then slams Luffy with the club. Luffy gets back up in 1010 and uses Haki's advanced technique, infusion. This increases Luffy's power even more in his base form, allowing Luffy to block and strike without making contact. That second part is actually irrelevant for now. It's not like Luffy needed to not touch Kaido because he was made of lava. It's just a cool visual. All that matters is that Luffy once again closed the gap in strength due to haki. In 1011, they exchange more infusion attacks. If Kaido could use infusion, why did he wait until now to do it? In 1013, Luffy is defeated off screen. He comes back at the end of 1025. He and Yamamoto team attack Kaido, who is once again in full dragon form. In 1026, Kaido shoots at Momo, who dodges. Luffy hits him with Elephant Gun, and Momo bites Kaido. How does Momo hurt Kaido? Kaido without the fruit can't be harmed by buso attacks due to his natural physical strength. Then when you add dragon scales and buso haki on top of that, he's nearly invincible. So why can Momo, who doesn't even have haki, harm Kaido? Even Luffy with buso haki was struggling to do damage. Luffy lands another hit while he's distracted. Then the two exchange infused blows. In 1027, he holds off Kaido to let the others escape. In 1036, Luffy uses Rock Gun after taking 2 hits. In 1037, Kaido gets drunk, which allows him to dodge Luffy and hit him. Kaido hits Luffy with wind in full dragon form. Then he turns half dragon and swings, but Luffy jumps over the attack and kicks Kaido. The dragon grabs Luffy with his tail and the 2 headbutt. That was decent CQC. Luffy loses the clash and Kaido shoots fire. Straw Hat dodges and uses Rock Gatling, while Kaido uses Meteor Shower. The two hit each other. Kaido swings, but Luffy blocks with infusion and then kicks with infusion. Decent micro strategy. Now the characters seem to be button mashing. There is no overarching strategy other than beating up the opponent. There is barely any micro strategy either. Additionally, why isn't Luffy using Gear 4th? His haki is now at a point where base form can fight Kaido, so wouldn't it be logical to use Gear 4th to get even stronger? When 4th expired against Katakuri, he ran away so that it could recharge. Luffy should have already had time to recharge after getting knocked out twice and having Momo and Yamamoto take over. The two keep fighting in 1041, and Luffy finally uses Gear 4th Snake Man. He pummels with Hydra. In 1042, he switches to Bound Man and continues attacking. Kaido turns into a full dragon, bites Luffy, and shoots him down with fire. Luffy needed Bound Man's durability to survive. Turning into Bound Man for defense was smart, but didn't Luffy survive Kaido's flame earlier with just guts? Why is it a threat here? Running out of time, Luffy uses Super Kong Gun. Kaido returns with Thunder Bagua. Luffy tries to use one more attack, but the CP0 interrupts and causes him to get hit by Bagua, knocking him out. Luffy gets back up in 1044. He now has Gear 5th. I should point out that although Luffy's body isn't colored black, he's using haki the entire time, both buso and Howl. This is explicitly stated by Kaido at the end of chapter 1045, right before he gets punched. Back to the fight. He beats up Kaido and reflects a blast with his rubber surroundings. Turning surroundings into rubber and reflecting was a good micro tactic. In 1045, after some goofiness, Luffy uses Gigant to beat up Kaido some more. His cartoon rubber allows him to be invincible and beat up Kaido even more. During this chapter, Luffy is once again harmed by fire. This goofy combat continues in 1046. At the end, Luffy grabs lightning. So far in Gear 5th, Luffy and Kaido have been mostly button mashing. The only move that made sense was the rubber wall. Luffy's rubber body is naturally resisting attacks and he's just throwing different moves at the wall just to show them off to the viewer. In 1047, Luffy plays with lightning to no effect. Then Kaido strikes Luffy. He makes the ground rubber to decrease the impact, which is smart, but then he bounces back to Kaido, who strikes again. These attacks harmed Luffy, despite Luffy showing invulnerability to blunt attacks. Why? I guess he increased his haki? Why didn't Kaido start out with the max haki? I don't know. Luffy grabs onto Kaido, who shoots wind and fire to make him let go. Luffy creates a giant fist for the finisher. In 1048, Kaido uses Flaming Dragon, forcing Luffy to let go, but also forcing him to put a mission to use. But a mission seems redundant now that he learned infusion. In 1049, Luffy punches him down and wins. That was an even worse fight than Katakuri. Let's start with the macro strategies. Luffy's only macro strategy is to overpower Kaido, if you can even count that as one. He starts to close the gap by just leveling up Buso. Then he closes it even more by somehow learning infusion. Then he closes it more by luckily getting Gear 5th. All just power-ups, and none of them were trained for. When he enters Gear 5th, he has the accidental strategy of taking all of the hits with his new body, and once again, overpowering Kaido. Kaido has no macro strategy, he's just fighting and button mashing. Also, why wasn't Luffy using Gear 4th after getting knocked out twice? That would have given him more strength and potentially ended the fight sooner, but instead, he played around in base form. Not a great plan. What about micro strategies? Combining Gear 2nd and 3rd for Red Rock was smart, but it's only used once. There are very few moments of CQC. Switching to Boundman for defense was good. Reflecting the blast in Gear 5th was smart. Kaido using Flaming Dragon was also smart. That's about all of the good micro strategies in this long fight. The rest is mostly button mashing. Luffy surviving the fire with guts was stupid and couldn't even be kept consistent. And Momo harming Kaido was also dumb. Kaido going from being unable to harm Luffy in Gear 5th to being able to harm him made no sense. It just reinforces the issues of haki. The easy solution would have been to have Flaming Dragon be the only way to harm Gear 5th. Good CQC could make up for a lack of macro strategies, but there is barely any here. Now, time for haki. Haki's first crime is allowing Kaido's powers to be lazy. Back before haki, characters needed to be powerful by having creative fruits like Logias. But Kaido is allowed to have the powers of a dragon form, dragon breath, and wind, and be one of the strongest characters because of haki. His powers are so lazy. If haki didn't exist, he would have had to have an actually creative and powerful devil fruit, which would have allowed for better strategies. The second crime is eliminating a setup. Kaido was set up as a character whose only kryptonite was Odin's swords. I hate kryptonites, but at least they provide strategy. Instead of Luffy using this setup, he just raises his haki to a level that can harm Kaido, despite previously being unable to. Luffy and Zoro even owned the swords. Luffy could have learned to use a sword, Zoro could have beaten Kaido, or the two could have worked together. But nah, haki got it. Then Luffy levels up his haki again with infusion. These two crimes combined essentially eliminate most creativity from this fight. Kaido's powers don't offer anything to work with. All the fighter has to do is survive his attacks and hit hard enough. Flaming Dragon, which was introduced at the end, was the only thing of substance. Once again, this isn't like some Naruto fights. Like I explained in the Katakuri essay, Lee vs Gaara and Naruto vs Sasuke had foreshadowed power-ups and good CQC. This fight had neither. Luffy's haki was established as not being strong enough to harm Kaido, which is why he trained with a mission, but that's just thrown out the window, cause Luffy's buso just gets strong enough when the plot needs it to. Then infusion comes out of nowhere. Then Gear 5th also comes out of nowhere. Luffy didn't have this power going into the fight, it just awakened on its own. In conclusion, this fight is played with button mashing, inconsistencies, uncreative abilities, a lack of good CQC, and haki levels driving the fight. I'm starting to question how many good fights One Piece even has. It's crazy how many times I've heard fans bring up Naruto's power escalation or quality of strategy. Meanwhile, One Piece is over here barely getting a passing grade and no one says anything. Bleach 2. If you think fights like these are acceptable, cool, but just make sure you keep your mouth closed when it comes to discussing fights in other stories. People only want to put their thinking caps on for certain stories. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and help me revolutionize the manga industry by buying my manga and spreading the word. All important links will be in the description.